Hey everyone, it's Len May, and welcome to the first show of Everything is Personal. So grateful to have everybody join, and I am delighted to have my beautiful, sexy co-host, John Small, here. So welcome, John.
Thank you,
Thanks
Len.
for...
Well, no, thank you so much, Len. It is a pleasure to be here on your first ever episode of Everything is Personal, because everything is personal. And I'm delighted to join you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's maybe I could start off by talking a little bit about myself and giving everybody a background. Just so everybody knows, I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Endocanna Health. We primarily do DNA testing and helping people match and find the right cannabinoid profile for them. I've also been in the cannabis space for over 25 years. First of all, as a patient, then as an activist, owner, operator. So, it's sort of in my blood, but I think everybody has cannabis in them, right, John?
You have a little bit more than me, but there's definitely some cannabis left over from last night's activities.
There you go. So I want to really talk about, we talk about everything is personal, but I really want to drill down into some experiences that maybe you or other people have had with cannabis, either good or bad. I find it really fascinating. So one of the reasons why I even got into this space is because I used to see two people with the same exact symptomatic condition take cannabis, the same exact cultivar or strain, and have a completely different experience. Some of them had really good experiences, some of them not so good. So I was wondering, have you ever had a negative experience with cannabis?
Yeah, I've had quite a few, not quite a few, but I've definitely had some negative experiences with cannabis that have actually, in a lot of ways, turned me off of cannabis for long periods of time. And then I kind of go back and I want to experiment again. But I think my experience is very much reminiscent of a lot of people's experience with cannabis, where it usually takes place with edibles. Edibles, as you know, Len, are extremely unpredictable and often magnify the effects of the feeling of being high of THC, and you can explain why that happens. But let me just tell you what's happened to me. I think the first bad experience that I had, or one of the worst experiences I had, was when I was home alone and I was feeling kind of frisky, and I had gotten a big bag of chocolate chip edible cookies, and I was working from home and everybody was out of the house, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to chill and I'm going to have a chocolate chip cookie. And it was like, I don't remember what it was, the ratio, but they were, I basically had two, and you probably should have half if you're somebody that doesn't have a tolerance for chocolate chip cookies. And I ate them, and then I completely forgot that I had eaten them. And I was basically doing something in the kitchen, and all of a sudden it was like this wave came over me. And I think everybody has had this, that's had a bad experience of, like, suddenly I was extremely high, but I was so high that I didn't even really know what was happening, because it was such an overwhelming feeling of being my reality being slightly altered, that it was almost like I was suddenly dreaming and I didn't know why. And it was a scary feeling. And literally, I would say that happened. And then I had this feeling, oh, I think I might be very, very high right now. And then the doorbell rang, and it was my two kids coming home from school. And my wife was at work, and I was alone with the kids, high out of my absolute mind and completely responsible for them. They were young at this age. They were like in the, whatever, 10 and 8 or whatever. And they, hey daddy. And I'm like, pull it together, and just completely freaking out, knowing that I can't call my wife because she'd be so mad at me that I would eat 2 chocolate chip edibles in the middle of the day. And so I'm just pulling it together. And it was pretty scary, because I was, it really made me have to, like, try to focus. But every time I would try to focus, I would kind of forget why I felt the way I forgot, and why I felt the way I did. And then I would remember. And then at one point I had to make the kids dinner, and I was just like, okay, you are now lifting the tray, you are putting it into the oven. I had to, like, tell myself what I was doing. they had no idea. And I can't wait to tell them this story when they grow up, because they'll be like, that's funny. But, you know, I was able to pull it off, but it was scary. And I really felt out of control, and I felt like I couldn't drive. You know, it was actually not a great situation to be in. If anything had ever happened to the kids, I was really out of my mind high. And that scared me. So after that, I didn't want to touch THC for like a year, even though I work at Green Entrepreneur Magazine and write about pot all day. And I, you know, I'll take my CBD products, but I was really scared. And then I went back and, you know, the lesson of start low, go slow was obviously not learned that day. And I just got cocky, ate stocky. I don't know. But, but anyway, so what happened to me that day, Len?
So first of all, your liver converts THC to a completely different substance. It's 11-oxyhydroxide delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol, which is a lot stronger than THC, which is the active ingredient in cannabis that makes you high. So it's stronger, it's a slower onset, and you could be a poor metabolizer. So if you're a poor metabolizer of THC through your digestive system and you're getting that conversion, so it takes a longer time, but it's much more intense. And then the other thing that happens is we have genes that trigger these anxiety markers, stress. So even if you have that and you took an edible that made you super high and it triggers some of those other genetic expressions, you're in for a very interesting experience. Some people get psychosis. Like I had a friend of mine that called 2 weeks ago. She's like, my roommate flipped out. She actually had a psychotic episode. I'm like, what happened? She smoked weed and that was it. And she just had a psychotic episode and triggered that. So, you know, you got to be careful with edibles. It's a completely different experience than, you know, smoking a joint or something like that.
Yeah, that's because you're not metabolizing it through your liver. And I know that's clear. And I did take something recently. I did a tincture, a very strong tincture. My other bad experience was that I took a tincture and it was like a very high THC to CBD tincture. I took it under my tongue before I went to bed. I slept for about 8 hours. And when I woke up, I went to go to the bathroom and I realized I was completely high. Yeah. And I felt weird. And I was like, what is wrong? And then I was like, oh my God, I'm really high right now. And it was very weird to wake up high. Because usually, you know, even if you're drunk, you go to sleep drunk, you wake up, you have a hangover. You're not drunk, you know, at least I've never been that way. And that was strange because it was a tincture. But I think when I told you about this, you said that I probably swallowed it. And
well, even so, I mean, most people don't take tinctures properly anyway. You're supposed to keep it on your tongue and let it go through your sublingual cavity so it penetrates your blood-brain. But most people keep it and then swallow. So it goes through your liver anyway. But you know, there's also a mindset. So I had a friend. Well, I still have a friend. His name.
You do?
He's a good friend of mine. I have a friend. He won't mind that I add him. His name is Mitch. And growing up, he was my roommate, and we always used to we'd smoke weed together. But when we go out, every once in a while, he would have what now I see is a panic attack. We would be in an environment, if there was some friction or it was loud, there was a lot of people, whatever it was, something would trigger him. And then he would start sweating and he would have like a panic attack. And that, a lot of it, now that I realize what it is, first of all, you have genetic predispositions. Second of all, that environment can actually trigger that as well. So not only, and the third thing is what you're consuming. So is it a tincture of, you know, just THC? What is the terpene profile? Because some terpene profiles can actually trigger that expression as well. So it gives you, you know, that feeling of stress or anxiety. It provokes it. It wants to give you an up. So it boosts serotonin production. And when you have too much of it, it makes you feel like you're a little bit out of control instead of taking something that's more sedative that makes you sort of relax, like has myrcene and linalool and terpenes like that. So terpenes are the essential oil that the plant produces. So it's a very complicated thing. You have all these different components, somewhere around 500 in the plant, and then you also have all these genes. You have, you know, hundreds of thousands, millions of different genes that once that's triggered, that's why it's a personalized experience. So you have to be really aware of what is, and by the way, to make it really simple for people, your nose knows. Go back to the basics. So if something smells fruity or has this sort of piney smell, usually it's an uplifting cultivar or strain. If
Right.
something smells skunky or diesely, that's more sedative. So if you're actually smelling it, if you're getting it in flower, you can kind of guide your own experience that way.
Right. All right. I'm going to pause the podcast for 1 second. I want to try something with your sound because I'm just worried that it's too like. So first of all, go about like what do you call it? The Texas Longhorns from your mic. That should be about the distance that you are.
Yeah.
And stay around that. And then also those little buttons on the side, they should be like at a 5 and a 4. Do you see them on the top there? Do they have like numbers? They don't?
No.
Okay.
One says gain, and it's in the middle, and the other one is at the first thing. So I can put it up a little bit. How's that?
Try it. That's good. And talk a little bit. Test.
Testing. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing.
Yeah.
How's that?
I think that's better. I think it's better.
Raise the gain at all?
Try the gain. Try the raise again. Good. Yeah.
Is that good?
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah.
I think I think it was almost too, it was like, I just didn't want it to be too poppy. Now, yeah, it wasn't too soft. It was like you're popping a lot. Okay. We'll resume our conversation now. Okay. Now, Tommy, we are resuming our conversation. But what about you, Len? Have you ever had bad experience? I mean, tell me how long you've been smoking cannabis.
I think it's helpful if I give you a little bit of background.
All right.
Understand.
It sounds weird. So let's turn down the gain. I just want to make sure.
How's that?
Yeah, it's better. So,
better?
I just saw ask you that question again. So Len, tell us a little bit about your background cannabis. Like, when did you first discover it? How long have you been smoking?
Yeah, many years, but I think it's going to be helpful if I give you a little bit of a background about myself, and it'll give you an indication of, I started smoking when I was about 14 or so, but look, I immigrated to this country I was born in Lithuania.
Oh,
so
really?
My parents, old Soviet Union and really, really old school. They had no idea the difference between cannabis and heroin. So when I was diagnosed with ADD when I was in my teens, and they tried to put me on all kinds of medication, and I was hanging out with some older kids, and we started dabbling in smoking cigarettes. I'm like, okay. So I was going to class, and they say, hey, you want to go out and smoke a little bit before class? I was like, yeah, sure. So we're in the woods next to my school, and there's one cigarette that's getting passed around. So I got one cigarette, and it's getting passed to me. So I got that cigarette. I took a drag of it. I'm like, wait, it doesn't taste like a cigarette that I had before. And they were laughing. I started coughing, and they're laughing at me. But what happened when I went back to class? My ADD is a bunch of different windows that are open in my head all the time, and this actually made me narrow those windows and bring them in, and I could focus for the first time. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. So I started trying to find, anyway, the cigarette was loaded with weed, whatever weed they had, nickel bags, with stems and seeds, whatever we would buy back in the day. But that was really became my medicine, my go-to medicine. And, over the years, my parents would catch me all the time. And I would smoke out my window in my room, and I would sneak it with friends. And my parents were just not happy about that. And over the time, getting caught, when I was, my dad had a conversation with me and said, that's it. I don't want you to ever do this. And I said, this is my medicine. I'm going to do it anyway. He said, don't bring it to my house. So, okay, I won't bring it to your house. And I'm skipping ahead a bunch, but this is a really interesting part of the story. So when I was about 18 or so, 17, 18, I used to have fake ID. So we used to go clubbing all the time. So we go out to, my ID said I was 24 or something like that. And so I would go out clubbing, and we would come home early in the morning, 3 o'clock or whatever, and we go fishing, my friends. We go fishing, and we fish till 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, come home, and I would sleep half the day. And one morning I wake up, or not morning, afternoon, late afternoon, I wake up, And my parents are sitting there on the kitchen table, and they have my little pouch. In my pouch, in my car, I had some weed, I had bowls, I had all my like weed related stuff. And they have it on their kitchen table. I was like, what's this? You guys went through my car. And my dad's like, well, I told you not to bring this in the house. I said, I didn't bring it in the house. It was in my car. I was like, oh, well, it's on my property. So it was this whole back and forth for many hours, if I can remember. And long story, even longer, my parents are like, well, what if we call the cops? I'm like, call the fucking cops. I don't give a shit.
Jesus.
So they did. They called the cops.
Wow. Your parents called the cops on you.
Yep, for weed. So they
so they were tough, old school Lithuanian.
Yeah, my dad was born in Belarus, so he's Belarusian, and my mom was born in Lithuania. So anyway, old school Soviet Union type, parents. And then cops came, 2 female police officers, and they were like,
were they hot?
They were not hot.
Oh, sorry. I thought this was the beginning of a different kind of podcast.
It's a different story, yeah. But
okay, go ahead.
Now that I look back, they were so hot, and I ended up leaving with one of them.
Right.
So they were very manly, and they were very mean. They were like, oh, we're gonna take you in and we're gonna lock you up. I'm like, okay, I have under 28 grams of misdemeanor. I'll sign myself out and all this stuff. And they were like, yeah, he's a smart ass. If it was my kid, I would just kick him to the curb. And they threw out my weed and my bowls. And my dad said, you have 5 minutes to get your shit. So I was able to go upstairs. I literally had 5 minutes. I threw clothes in his suitcase. And he literally kicked me out the door.
Wow. Like physically with his foot?
With his foot.
Wow.
So I had a little bit of money, like $500 to my name, suitcase of clothes, and a car. And I ended up like, $15 a night motel rooms and, couch surf for a little while, hung out with my girlfriend. And that was kind of the start of me getting my shit together. But the irony of this whole thing is my parents both take formulations that I actually create and help for, whatever conditions they have now. So they came full circle to actually supporting what I do. So it took took years and years and years of trying to educate them that this is, a therapeutic wellness product. It's a plant. And so that's kind of my background story. So going back to your question, did I ever have a bad experience? I had an experience once that was very, very intense. I was at a dab bar, my first time at a dab bar. Dabs are concentrates that people take. It looks like you're actually doing drugs. If anybody has seen it, it's like this glass bong looking thing. And then you have to put a concentrated form of cannabis, which is an oil that comes from the plant. It's at least 3 times as strong as, flour. So you put it into this bong glass pipe looking thing and you torch it with a blowtorch and you take a hit. When I took my first dab hit, all the receptors were like, whoa, it blew my mind completely. My heart started racing.
Yeah.
And I was just,
that's the way I feel.
Yeah. I was like, holy shit, what is this? And then I sort of talked myself down. I said, okay, this is cannabis. Nothing's going to happen to me. I just took too much. So what do? I just drink some water and chill. And after I relaxed and then took my second hit.
See, that's the difference between us. I didn't take my second hit. That might be my genetic makeup. Like I had to spend, when other times that I've gotten too high, just talking myself into that I'm going to be okay. This is fine. This feeling is going to go away eventually. It's not going to last forever. You're not going to feel like this forever. And people talk about being paranoid. I don't know if that's what they mean. There's a kind of an alarming feeling, right? Where that you feel very different than you usually feel, and that your sense of reality and your sense of self is altered somewhat. And your sense of your place in the world, like it just is altered. And some people I think really love that feeling.
Yeah. I think I was listening to some people talk about this before, and some people like to be scared, to be out of control. I don't have that gene, but I do have a control gene, but it's sort of a conditioning. I don't have the genes that are related to anxiety and paranoia and some of those psychosis. I don't have those. But some people that do, it gets triggered and it can be pretty serious. But if you think like, it's the same thing with psychedelics. If you have a psychedelic experience, you're letting go of control. I have control issues. So for me, the first time going through that journey, being able to let go and say, you know what, I just have to trust the process. That's sort of, it's sort of a thing that you do in life altogether. It's either you control the process or you sort of give into the process and let the journey take its course. And if you realize, nothing bad is going to happen to you, you kind of close your eyes and dive in, you can have a really good experience. But if you try to fight that experience, it sort of goes this sort of hamster wheel. It continues to go and you start freaking yourself out. And that's when, heart rate goes up and all that stuff too. So now you're feeling, oh my God, is there something really wrong with me? And there isn't.
Your anxiety causes more anxiety, right?
It's perpetual. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when that happens to you, I think the best thing to do is, to find a place to sit down, like you said, have a glass of water, and then just like what I tried to do is, like you said, I tried to just enjoy. I tried to be like, okay, there's all these people that, have written great music being high and do great comedy being high and all this stuff. And there must be something to this feeling that I'm trying to embrace it rather than like run from it. You just have to know this is going to go away. Like you're not going to feel like this forever, and maybe enjoy it while you do feel like this. But yeah, I think that's the fear. It's just very different feeling than feeling drunk, right? It's just a different sensation. And I think it throws you off when you're not used to it.
Yeah. Completely different sensation. You're right.
Completely different sensation. All right. So you have not had the worst experiences being high, but you have had some very interesting experiences being high. Tell me, or just with cannabis, tell me some of the things in your life that have been enhanced by the cannabis experience. I don't know, in your life.
Well, everything has been enhanced, but I think it's going back to sort of my story where I was out on my own and I had an experience that really changed my life. I got a job at a record store called Tower Records. And I wasn't working. I was just getting ready to start college. And I started working as a cashier. And everybody in the store, I guess I can say this now because the company's out of business, but everybody would get high. Everybody would get high, including the manager and everybody. And people would, start coming up. Like people who would shop at the record store, we would smoke on breaks and all that.
Was this the Tower Records on Sunset?
No, this is I'm from Philly, right?
Yeah, this is back in Philly.
In Philly, right? So this is Tower Records in Philly. So
been there. Back in the day, I remember it.
It was the best job I ever had. $7 an hour, but I got thousands of CDs and vinyl and got to meet a whole bunch of people. So it was a great job. And then what happened was people started asking me, "Hey, can you get weed because you smell like weed?" So I kind of I started a business, I guess, to try to help me pay for college. We had the first, I guess, illegal delivery service. People would page me with my beeper. Yes, we had beepers. It was doctors and drug dealers that had beepers. And my buddy would, I would page my buddy, and he would go back to my apartment, and he would deliver whatever people would ask. So we had this business going for a while. So that was a really interesting experience because it allowed me to get access and start learning about cannabis. And when I started getting different cannabis, I was like, oh, why is this one crystally? Why is this one smell this way? What is it? And I started really, really digging into reading as much as I possibly could to find out what all this stuff means and why people have different experiences and why this one is a different strain than another one. So that became one of my passions. And in doing so, I was the guy that always had weed. And what happened was every single time we would be out, and I talked about fake ID, but we would go to clubs. And when we go to a club, you get the guy at the door, hey, you want to smoke? And you get the guy at the door high. Then the DJs were next. And then we would hang out, in small clubs where there were bands. I would start smoking with the bands. And that was sort of my entry into, okay, now I can have some interesting experiences with people. There was one where we drove, this is in 1990, MTV Spring Break, 1990. So we got into these souped up Jeeps that we had to stop every hour or two to get gas because the gas gauge wasn't working. And we drove from Philly all the way to Daytona. And the people, so we're hanging out with the VJs from MTV there because my friend had a press pass. And then we were there to see Stone Temple Pilots and Cypress Hill. And we just got the cassette of Cypress Hill's first album. And we were listening to that whole thing all the way down. And it was incredible. They did a great show. So we're walking, we're walking after the show, and we see Cypress Hill, on their balcony in a hotel. I think it was Be Real, or maybe it was Be and Send Dogg. And we see them, we're yelling, hey, Cypress Hill. And we could barely hear them, but we were doing sign language. Like they put up the international sign for weed where the two fingers go up to your mouth, kind of, hey, and like, do you have any? And I'm like, yes, I do. They're like, well, all right, come up. Like, what room? And they with their hands are like, room 10, 24, whatever that room was. So we came up to their room, and I'm like, hey, and it was Send Dogg, and it was Muggs, and Be Real.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, let's smoke a joint. And Muggs like, no, we're smoking a blunt. So, Muggs
you got to get your terminology right here. Come on.
So Muggs taught me how to roll a blunt. It was the first blunt I've ever smoked was with DJ Muggs. We had a great experience, and we hung out a couple more times. And then when I came back to Philly, they were on a label called Rough House, which was a Philadelphia label back then. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Crisscross was on that label. I think maybe the Fugees were signed to that label too. So the guy who ran that label, Chris Schwartz, was like, hey, man, I know you guys are big fans. There's a show, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, we were able to attend the show for like 50 people. We got to hang out with them again, and which was, I'm not sure Be Real remembers that, but that was one of the highlights.
I'll ask him next time I see him.
All right.
Rough House had the Fugees, Cypress Hill, Crisscross, Wyclef, Lauryn Hill. That's it.
Yep.
Beanie Siegel. I remember Beanie Siegel. Wow.
Beanie Siegel.
That's quite and the Goats.
Oh, the Goats. Yeah.
The Goats are awesome. If you know who the Goats are, you're a real hip hop head.
That is true. So I had an experience with the Goats that they were playing in a place in Philly called Silk City, and Questlove from the Roots, he would play there once in a while, drum, and they had DJs there. So one night the Goats were performing there, and they brought up Slick Rick, and Slick Rick, I think, was locked up for a little while. Don't quote me, but we can do our research and fact check on that.
Slick Rick definitely had some issues with the law. There's no question about it.
So he got on stage and to play with them, and he goes, no. Before I go on, I got to get high. Anybody have a joint? And it just so happens that I was in the front row, and I had a joint, rarely. And so I handed him a joint, so I got a chance to smoke with Slick Rick.
That's pretty awesome. La-di-da-di. We like to party. Well, I guess my one experience smoking with a hip hop artist was Snoop Dogg. I was doing a story for Stuff magazine about Snoop Dogg. This is in 2003. And so I went to the Dog Pound. Have you been to the Dog Pound, Len? Have you had the pleasure of going to the Dog Pound where Snoop lives? And did you go there?
Yeah, I had the pleasure of having a dispensary, or a bunch of them, called Kush Kingdom, and we're the exclusive home of Corrupt's Kush.
Oh,
so
wow.
I got to hang out with the Dog Pound.
Oh, that's awesome. So the Dog Pound was really basically like a house in very eastern LA. I think it was in Pomona. And it was there was a lot of dogs around. I do remember that, both canines and actually human beings. And Snoop pulled up in a purple Porsche. I remember he was wearing his Laker jersey. He had just been at football practice with his kid. And there was a guy whose one job it was to roll Snoop's joints. and he was rolling joints for Snoop all day. And, you know, he asked me if I was interviewing him for this story, and he was sort of sitting
was
around.
it joints or blunts?
They were blunts. I'm sorry. I can't believe what am I?
Terminology, John. Come on.
I gotta pull it together here. So he rolled me a blunt. And I said, what is this? And I'm smoking. He said, oh, that's Gangsta Gumbo. And so I will never forget Gangsta Gumbo. And at the time, the Don Magic Juan was like his best friend. Yep. And Don Magic Juan is, was kind of like this pimp who drives around in a green Cadillac and wears green suits and has a grill, and he's a total character. But the big expression at the time was chutch. So everything they would say chutch. So you'd say like, oh, let me get some of that blunt, chutch. So we just kept saying chutch, which was actually short for church. And the other thing that he kept saying, he kept calling me nephew, which I loved. He kept calling me his nephew. You want some, nephew, instead of cousin. I loved it. I was his nephew.
Yeah.
But I smoked this Gangsta Gumbo, and that was, luckily I only had one puff. I was able to recover, but I do remember feeling pretty good. It wasn't a scary kind of high, and maybe because everybody else in the place was high. But it was memorable, and he gave me a great interview. At one point, I asked him if he was a dog or a cat person. I was so high that I asked him if he was a dog or a cat person. When you ask Snoop Dogg if he's a dog,
it would have been funny if he would have said cat.
Yeah. He said no. He said, you're a fool for that. I just remember that was his answer. He said, you're a fool for that. But anyway, he was the greatest. And, afterwards, it was so fun because the whole interview was really funny, and he was being such a good sport. And then afterwards, as we were leaving, he said, you're going to take care of me, right? And he gave me a wink. Like, he's like, this is all fun and games, but you're going to take care of me. You're not going to make me look like an idiot. And I said, no, I'll take care of you, Snoop. But it was a great experience, and I'll never forget as long as I live. And I still have a picture behind me by my turntables of me and Snoop and Don Magic Juan. But if you ever have an opportunity to smoke with a rapper, I recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely. But Snoop is hardcore, man. Like it's one after the other. He had a guy named OG Daddy V who would roll and just make jokes the whole time. He was super funny, and he would roll him like a pack full of blunts. And he would smoke one after the other. As soon as one is done, he lights up another. So if you're going to smoke with a rapper, just get ready, because you may be in for, a pack of blunts by the time you're done.
For sure. All right. What else should we talk about, Len? I have to do this call in 4 minutes. I can come back and talk to you in 5. I just don't want to, I don't want to mess up this guy.
No, it's fine, because I have.
You have a call too?
Yeah, I have a call.
So why don't you wrap us up? So that was fun, come back, we'll be back next week. If you want to give any shout out to your company, I don't know if you want to give any kind of you don't want to do that.
Nah.
All right.
Nah.
All right. So John Small, thank you for joining me. Dak, just do an outro. Hit it.
John Small, thank you so much for joining me. I had so much fun. I mean, this is kind of what we do when we get together anyway and talk. It's so much fun to be together. And shoot the shit, man. There's nothing serious. I appreciate everybody joining us. Tune in next week. We'll talk about cannabis. We'll talk about music, and we'll talk about business and whatever else we talk about.
Whatever else.
Yep.
All right, y'all. We'll see you next week.
See you next week. Peace.
All right. That was great. I will send that over to Tommy. I still feel like I really do need to go over to your house and work on why you can't hear yourself, because it's frustrating, because I think if you could hear yourself, you would know not to go. You can just hear. Like, I can hear myself. I know how it sounds.
I hear you great.
Right.
Like, you're coming so clear.
I know. I want you to have the same experience. So I'm going to come over. Maybe we'll make a time for me to come over next week.
Cool. Let's do it.
All right. In the meantime and in between time, I'm out.
All right, man.
All right, brother. I'll see you later.
All right, brother. Thanks.
Peace.